Vampires are probably the most popular fantasy creature to ever exist. These bloodsuckers have haunted us for centuries, at least in our stories. I guess it was just a matter of time before we saw some pretty weird takes on the creatures in different media. And, well, today, we'll be talking about one of the strangest and most beloved tales revolving around vampires. This sci-fi post-apocalyptic anime is somehow both disturbing and heartfelt, making it one of the most unique properties we've ever seen. In case you're still wondering, we're talking about Vampire Hunter D. We're going to be taking a trip through the entire history of the illustrious Dhampir. The world of vampires, of monsters and men. The protagonist of this violent saga is a man who just goes by D, and as you can probably expect, D is a vampire hunter. That's how they got the title of the show, do you get it? Well, in our opinion, this tall, lanky Dhampir might just be one of the most intriguing protagonists we've ever seen. The guy is about 10,000 years old and probably holds more secrets than we could ever imagine. The elusive nature of D as a protagonist is actually the first thing that draws the audience in, and to be honest, the fascination never really wears off. Despite the abnormally large number of novels and films in the series, writer Hideyuki Kikuchi has been able to pull off a consistent tone across all 53 novels in the series. Illustrator Yoshitaka Amano's designs for D and the rest of the cast are as striking today as they were back in 1983. However, before we delve into plot details and D's character, let's take a brief look at the sick and twisted world he was born into. From the very first frame, it's evident that the world of Vampire Hunter D is a sci-fi dystopia, far removed from our own reality. As the story progresses, we learn that these desolate landscapes are the result of a nuclear war that nearly wiped out all living creatures. The planet was once ruled by the ruthless vampires who formed the nobility. Their reign was a terrifying one, but all empires fall sooner or later. In the case of the vampires, it was the decadence of these creatures that brought about their destruction. When the bloodsuckers were at the top of the food chain, the entire planet was haunted by nightmarish ancient demons, mutants, and technological monstrosities. But now that some semblance of order and human control is returning, the monsters and the vampires find themselves threatened. And chief among these threats are the independent vampire hunters, who grew pretty common during this era. In 1999, the aforementioned nuclear war took place, and nothing was ever the same. They sensed the coming of the nuclear Armageddon and sequestered everything that was required to rebuild civilization in their shelters. Due to the vampire race's intricate understanding of both science and magic, the nobility was able to genetically engineer most living creatures on the planet to grant them supernatural abilities like regeneration and immortality, which improved their chances of survival. After years of experimentation, the nobility was able to craft a society where vampires and humans coexisted, but with the humans on the lower rung of the social ladder. Also, it's interesting to note that despite finding an appropriate substitute for blood, the vampires continued to feed on humans to satisfy their thirst. The cruelty increased further when the vampires discovered something called scientific prophecy, a system that incorporates both science and magic to determine that the nobility is indeed the zenith of existence. However, it also declares that the vampires are doomed to be overthrown by the less perfect humans. Despite these bold predictions, humanity wasn't really doing well during this period. After generations of subjugation, human beings had the fear of vampires woven into their genetics and even forgot standard vampiric weaknesses such as garlic and crucifixes. During these dark times, when most humans couldn't even look at vampires without entirely losing them, only two groups could stand against the nobility. The first was the stubborn frontier dwellers, while the second were the vampire hunters. The most unique thing about Vampire Hunter D's take on vampires is the fact that these creatures can still reproduce in this world. Moreover, they can also get together with humans to give birth to Dhampirs. These Dhampirs cease aging once they attain maturity and retain most of the powers exhibited by your average vampire. And as you've probably guessed by now, that's exactly what D is. I guess it's finally time to take that trip through the origin story of our favorite vampire slayer. Dhampir's early years, the origin story of Vampire Hunter D. It's kinda difficult to figure out where D really comes from, as he's known to be something of a mystery even to the people who consider him a friend. But over the years, we've gathered that D was originally a conjoined twin with an identical sibling who came to be known as Fake D. The two possessed all the supernatural abilities associated with Dhampirs. However, due to their different personalities, the two brothers soon began to see each other as enemies. The duo was born deep beneath the village of Sedok, inside the Sacred Ancestors Research Facility. This infamous facility was known to be the place where the nobility conducted the worst of their vampire-human hybrid experiments. Well, D seems to be a result of this experimentation himself, but the Dhampir's body was augmented even further by the addition of its endlessly perverted left hand. For the uninitiated, Dee's left hand is actually a sentient creature with its own consciousness. Though the two are bound in a symbiotic relationship, it's not uncommon for the left hand to go against his master, as the two are total opposites in terms of personality. The left hand serves as comic relief during most of the series, but the grotesque appendage can also get serious when the situation calls for it. It grants Dee numerous powers, like superhuman strength and even a slew of celestial abilities. It's an unlikely pairing, but they're definitely pretty fun together. Apart from these few tidbits, little else is known about Dee. Despite so many sequels, it's still unknown where Dee is going or who he's searching for. However, these mysteries add a strange intrigue to Dee's journey, as we're never really sure where the black-robed heartthrob is heading. Dee's age is never actually revealed to the audience. It has often been implied that he is as ancient as they can get, somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 years old. It's kind of obvious that this man has all the combat experience he needs to take out even the most powerful vampires. Due to his mixed heritage, he doesn't feel the typical vampiric thirst for blood. He can even go out in the sun. Since he's the perfect mixture of both races, most other characters either admire or revere the man. There are certainly many missing pieces to Dee's origin story, but that does keep us coming back to this strange, otherworldly tale. Also, there's one critical aspect of his identity that we've overlooked so far, and that's his mysterious connection to the very first vampire, the Sacred Ancestor. Dee and the Sacred Ancestor, how are they related? In the dystopian world of vampire hunter Dee, there's one man who stands above all other monsters at the very top of the nobility. This is the ancient vampire known only as the Sacred Ancestor, and over the years, a pretty strange relationship has been established between this entity and our protagonist. It's rumored that the Secret Ancestor is actually the progenitor of the entire race of vampires, and stands as the only pure-blooded vampire in the entire history of our planet. It was under the Sacred Ancestor's leadership that the nobility was able to survive the nuclear annihilation of 1999, and the guy is seen as something of a messianic figure by most of the nobility. Around 4000 AD, when the nobility began to decline, the Sacred Ancestor conducted many experiments, which included mixing DNA with other species like humans. As we already know, Dee was born in a facility run by the Sacred Ancestor himself. However, the bond between the two actually runs far deeper than it appears. Many characters have noted that the Sacred Ancestor has two lineages. The first were the vampires who had been turned by him, while the second were the kids born to him through natural intercourse. Many of these kids were from mixed lineages, and it has long been rumored that the most prominent of all the Ancestor's offspring is Dee himself. Though this has not been confirmed by any reliable sources, the clues are scattered throughout the series. It's pretty well known that the Sacred Ancestor was trying to create the perfect noble/human hybrid in order to save the vampires from extinction. Also, many characters have noted that Dee bears a stark resemblance to the Ancestor, and it's pretty likely that this fact will be confirmed in the future. If this does end up being true, then we can be sure that Dee inherited some of Sacred Ancestor's abilities, and this will actually go a long way towards explaining Dee's unnatural power. However, Dee is not the only child of the Sacred Ancestor, and this all-powerful monarch has managed to spread his bloodline across the planet. However, even among all these characters, Dee seems to have inherited most of the ancient vampire's strengths and skills, making him a true threat to the vampires in every sense of the word. Now that we've gone through much of Dee's backstory, I guess it's time that we dive right into his murderous quest towards ridding the world of vampires. The history of vampire hunter Dee. Due to the long and storied nature of Dee's saga, his tale has been spread across numerous light novels and films. To kick this off, we'll be starting with the very first installment. The 1985 animated film, known simply as Vampire Hunter Dee, follows the original light novel pretty closely and serves as a solid entry point for any new viewers wanting to start their vampire hunter binge. Vampire Hunter Dee. In truly bloody fashion, the first Vampire Hunter film opens with a brutal vampire attack on a young girl named Doris Lang. Doris was orphaned at a young age due to the untimely death of her parents, who were werewolf hunters. The opening goes a long ways in establishing the kind of world we're dealing with, and also provides a glimpse at how terrifying vampires can be. There is something truly sickening about watching the young guard struggle against the 10,000-year-old Count Magnus. Against all expectations, Doris somehow manages to survive and escape from the Count's domain. Despite this, time seems to be running short, as the bite means that Doris herself will be reduced to a vampire in just a short while. Fortunately, she comes across a mysterious vampire hunter dressed in black, which is actually too good looking for anyone living through a post-apocalyptic nightmare. This mysterious figure turns out to be our protagonist, Dee, an emotionless mercenary who seems to know how to handle himself around the bloodthirsty nobility. Doris wastes no time in hiring the vampire to exact her revenge on the Count and stop her conversion into a vampire. The duo makes their way into town, where they're joined by Doris's younger brother, Dan. It seems like the news of the attack has spread through the village, and the mayor's son, Greco-Roman, offers to help Doris, but, well, only if he could have the young woman for himself. Not exactly a selfless soul, but what did you even expect? Things are about to take an even more unexpected turn when Dee requests all the authorities in town take Doris into custody until he manages to execute the Count. Unfortunately, Dee isn't the one to draw first blood, as that very night, Doris's farm is attacked by the Count's underling, Ray Ginsei, and his daughter, La Armica. These minor antagonists still stand out as two of the most detestable characters in the entire series due to their unparalleled hatred for humans. Dee rushes to the farm's defense, and soon a battle ensues. We learn that Ray actually possesses the power to manipulate space around him, which enables the mutant to redirect anything Dee throws at her. This is our first taste of the power possessed by mutated humans, and it's quite shocking to say the least. Even Dee is caught off guard for a moment as he finds his attack turned against him. It's a clear hit, and for a moment, it seems that the battle has been lost. However, Dee just casually rises to his feet and proceeds to heal his wounds, and it's his enemy's turn to be shocked. Well, the shock turns to utter disbelief when Ray and La Armica learn that Dee is actually a Dhampir. He easily fends off both attackers, but lets them go with a warning for the Count. The scene does a pretty good job of building anticipation for the inevitable encounter between Dee and the nefarious Count Magnus. We don't have to wait long for the altercation either, as Dee is out for the Count's castle the very next morning. Here, we see one of the first full-fledged fights of the series between Dee and the Count's monstrous minions. This is also where we get our first glimpse of the enormous power possessed by Dee's left hand. Despite his valiant efforts, Dee finds himself at a loss as Doris is kidnapped by Ray. Still, he persists and manages to rescue the young guard from the Count's castle. Though this encounter does not provide a final conclusion to the enmity between Dee and the Count, it still alerts Lee regarding Dee's strange lineage. The tension between Dee and Count Magnus Lee escalates further when the town mayor's son, Greco, overhears Ray and the Count discuss a strange contraption known as the time-bewitching incense. We learn that this candle is made out of a mythical substance that's powerful enough to weaken anyone with vampire blood in their veins. In order to use this tool on Dee, Ray kidnaps Doris's younger brother. Though Dee has been depicted as emotionless and unempathetic until this point, we see that he still has the heart of a true hero when he comes to rescue Dan, despite knowing the danger. Well, surprisingly, the candle turns out to be fake, and Dee is able to rescue Dan while Ray loses a hand in his misguided attempt. Soon after this fight, our heroes suffer yet another betrayal at the hands of Doris and Dan's father figure, a friendly town doctor named Faringo. It is revealed that Faringo is just a vampire in league with Count Lee. The traitor lures poor Doris into a trap. However, the doctor pays the price for his misdeeds when he's brutally murdered by La Armica just for requesting to share their prey with the Count. Later, it's revealed that after discovering the existence of the bewitched candle, Greco stole it from under the vampire's noses. He uses the candle in an attempt to stop La Armica from hurting Doris, but it also has the unwanted effect of weakening her. This is due to the vampiric infection taking hold within her. Dan views this scene from afar and shoots poor Greco down a cliff. So much for good deeds, I suppose. This is also the first time we've witnessed Dee's unmatched charm firsthand. Throughout Vampire Hunter D, it's implied that Dee is the most beautiful man to ever make his way across this monster-infested wasteland. He is said to be so gorgeous that women swoon in his presence, and even men are unable to contain their excitement when they behold him. Now that's some serious riz, and Doris is the first one to fall victim to the handsome stranger. She declares her love for Dee, but the moment she embraces the hunter, something dark is triggered inside him. Dee's inherent vampiric impulses force the hunter to push Doris away from him for fear of drinking her blood, and we now know that the Dhampir practices way more restraint than most other vampires. Ray, the space-warping mutant, finds Greco and kills him to recover the real candle. He then confronts Dee and manages to deliver a fatal wound thanks to the candle and wooden stake. It seems even Dhampirs are weak against stakes once they pierce the heart. Considering Dee incapacitated, Doris is forced back to the castle by Ray. In the castle, conflict emerges between the Count and his faithful mutant servant. Ray pleads with his master to grant him eternal life as a member of the nobility in exchange for the task he's just accomplished. However, Ray's request falls on deaf ears, and the Count just reminds him of his past mistakes. Back at the site of the attack, a lowly mutant tries to devour Dee's body, and for a moment, it seems like the story is going to take a pretty dark turn. But the left hand revives the comatose hunter just in time, and the hunter begins to prepare for his confrontation with the Count. Back at the castle, everything seems ready for the Count and Doris's wedding, but Dan attacks the terrifying procession. It's evident that Dan's attempt is completely futile, and the youngster stands literally no chance in the face of these overpowered vampires. The counterattack knocks Dan into a deep chasm, and he would have definitely met his end had it not been for Ray, who's going through a change of heart. Owing to the Count's betrayal, Ray seems to hold a grudge against the noble, and she proceeds to use the candle to weaken him, but it turns out that Count Lee is far too powerful for such tricks, and he uses his telekinetic abilities to kill Ray. Even the candle is destroyed in this process. The marriage ceremony nears its completion, and the Count is just about to stick his filthy fangs into Doris when Dee appears to save the day. But even that won't be as easy as it seems. As a member of the nobility, the Count is one of the most powerful vampires Dee has ever faced, and his attacks end up as futile as Ray's. Despite his best efforts, the Dhampir finds himself on the receiving end. Fortunately, in the final moments of the battle, Dee manages to awaken his own telekinetic powers, which enable him to drive a stake right through Lee's heart. As most fans of fantasy fiction probably know by now, once you kill the big bad in a story like this, his lair is bound to tumble down. Dee tries his best to save La Armika from being buried under the debris of her father's castle and tries to convince her to live as a human. However, the faithful daughter stays by her father's side and sacrifices her life as their castle falls apart. The party of heroes is able to escape the castle, and now that the task is accomplished, Dee must set out on his next adventure. After all, there are plenty more vampires to be slain. He bids goodbye to Dan and Doris, even smiling at them. I guess vampire hunters might have some feelings after all. As one of the earliest anime productions targeted at an adult demographic, the production of Vampire Hunter D captured the attention of adult male viewers here in the West. This, combined with the increasing popularity of original video animations, meant that Vampire Hunter D was an unexpected hit outside of Japan. This opened up the American market for Japanese productions, and in the following years, we'd see even more adaptations of pop culture icons coming from Japan. Over the years, the film has achieved an almost cult-like status thanks to the prevalence of online forums and chat rooms. I guess the world was as interested in Dee's next adventure as we were, but before we could move on to the next installment in the franchise, we received an updated version of the 1985 film. Here, the team tried to fix many of the linguistic errors from the original release, and to be honest, we're pretty impressed with their attention to detail. After this, it was time for Bloodlust. Vampire Hunter D: Bloodlust. Though the first film was a significant success in terms of box office revenue, we still had to wait more than a decade for the return of Vampire Hunter D. The film began production in 1997 and was made with the explicit intent of being released in American theaters. All the while, die-hard fans waited with bated breath for the return of our favorite Dhampir. The second film, titled Vampire Hunter D: Bloodlust, borrows a majority of its plot from Kikuchi's third novel in the series, Demon Death Case. The tale begins when a woman named Charlotte Elborn is abducted by a vampire nobleman in the middle of the night. The vampiric scoundrel in this story is a guy called Baron Meyer Link. As expected, Charlotte's father and brother are torn by the girl's sudden disappearance and hire the best hunters they can to save her. Charlotte's wealthy father, John, contacts Dee to get his daughter, while her older brother Adam hires the Marcus brothers. The Marcus brothers are a group of traveling hunters led by the eerily composed Borgoff and comprising Nolt, Kyle, Grove, and Layla. Each of these team members possesses a key skill. Nolt is the heavy hitter, Kyle serves as the blade master, Grove is frail and weak but has considerable prowess as a psychic, while the last member, Layla, is fueled by an unparalleled hatred for vampires. As the investigation into Charlotte's disappearance begins, it becomes evident that Charlotte left the mansion with complete consent. The bloodthirsty Baron hadn't kidnapped her. Instead, the duo had eloped together out of love. It's quite the twist, to be honest. Meanwhile, Baron Meyer hires the mutant Barbaroi to safeguard the mansion, and he turns out to be a particularly nasty specimen. The Barbaroi, meanwhile, are made up of the shapeshifter Caroline, the shadow manipulator Benj, and a werewolf named Mashira. They're not really the kind of people you'd want as friends, but they get the job done. Benj kills off Nolt with surprising ease, and the Marcus brothers are forced to confront the Barbaroi in their home territory. It is also during this time that the brothers visit. Needless to say, a full-fledged battle ensues, and Dee is trapped in a void by the shadow manipulator. But as you'd probably expect, this is a momentary obstruction, and the Dhampir manages to make his way through it. By the end of this brief confrontation, the Marcus brothers are able to avenge their comrade by killing Benj. Following this, the hunters travel to a nearby town, which turns out to be a pretty neat homage to all those western towns we've seen over the years. Layla, fueled by her hatred for the vampires, beckons the sheriff of the town to stop Dee from entering. But, as we all know, it isn't that easy to stop the stoic Dhampir, and an old man from the village feels the same. He vouches for Dee by narrating an incident where Dee saved him as a child. Elsewhere, Meyer's carriage comes to a stop as daytime approaches. Charlotte wanders out of the vehicle and wanders off into the scenic surroundings. Here, she encounters Dee and Layla, but before our heroes can talk, Caroline appears on the scene. She engages the two hunters while the werewolf Mashira runs off with her master's carriage. Caroline is soundly defeated by the hunters, but Dee suffers from too much sunlight and is forced to seek shelter. After all, vampires and dhampirs aren't really known for their love of sunny climes. This leaves Layla alone, and everything goes wrong when we find out that Caroline has been revived. As a mere human, Layla stands no chance against the shapeshifter and is only saved when lightning strikes the mutant down. Divine retribution, we suppose, but we're not complaining. This gives Layla and Dee some time alone in the shelter, and Layla reveals the reason behind her hatred for the vampires. We learn that back when the hunter was still a child, her mother was kidnapped by a vampire. When the woman finally returned home, she was a completely different person who had just killed Layla's father in cold blood. This led to the villagers stoning Layla's mother to death, and the young girl would eventually leave her village to join the Marcus brothers hunting bloodsuckers. We see a strange bond form between Layla and Dee, with the two comrades promising to visit each other's graves depending on who dies first. Well, that's some pretty obvious foreshadowing, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Meanwhile, Charlotte and the Baron's chariot are ambushed by the Marcus brothers on a bridge. They succeed in the task by bombing the bridge and then hijacking Charlotte's ride, but Mashira's enhanced senses alert the vampires and they're able to make it through. This is also where Kyle, the blade expert of the group, is killed. Even their leader, Borgoth, ends up suffering considerable injuries and losing an eye. The carriage makes it to the other side of the bridge and stands up at the humongous castle Chaith, where Countess Carmilla Elizabeth Bathory awaits the couple. Mashira stays behind to guard the way, but falls to Dee's undeniable might. Later, we also learn that Meyer has contacted the Countess of the region to request entry into the City of the Night. This infamous town is a hidden vampire refuge located in the space of all places. After all, the vampires are pretty good at both science and magic. But Carmilla isn't the most trustworthy individual, as all this has been just a ploy on her part to get her hands on Charlotte. She slays Meyer, albeit temporarily, and then proceeds to bite his bride. Revived through her blood, she generates hallucinations to haunt the members of the hero's party, which by now consists of just Dee, Borgoth, and Layla. These hallucinations are configured for each individual psyche, but cause the most damage to Borgoth, who turns against his own comrades. Dee is mostly unaffected, but Layla is torn by the memories of her childhood. The psychic, Grove, uses this moment to make an appearance and saves Layla by blowing up the vampiric Borgoth for good. The final battle begins with Dee and Carmilla. It's a difficult fight, but Dee manages to defeat the Countess's spirit while a reawakened woman takes out her body. Talk about teamwork. The duo wins their fight against the Countess, but they soon come to the realization that they will now have to fight with each other. Dee is clearly the superior fighter out of the two, but he spares the Baron's life, given that he's a really good soul trapped in a vampire's body. Meyer departs for the City of the Night using the castle ship, while Layla and Dee start towards home. On their way, they bid each other farewell, wishing each other success. The film also features an epilogue that takes place decades after the main story. We travel to Layla's funeral, where a large number of people are in attendance. Heading the ceremony is Layla's daughter, who recognizes a familiar face in the distance. Who else could it be but our protagonist? Of course it's Dee. He has a promise to keep. In the final moments of the film, Dee realizes that Layla was wrong about nobody attending her funeral. Yeah, that moment will make even the toughest of you tear up, and it's evidence that Vampire Hunter D isn't just about vampires and gore. Though the film didn't find much success during its theatrical run, it made most of its money back via DVD sales and was even listed at number 7 on the top DVD sales chart in March 2002. The 2007 manga! Our next encounter with Vampire Hunter D wouldn't be through a film, but instead in a manga. At the 2006 Anime Expo, series creator Kikuchi announced his latest collaboration with digital manga publishing for a slew of graphic novels illustrated by Saiko Takaki. These manga adaptations would fall into the seinen genre, targeted mostly at adults, allowing them to retain the mature and gory aesthetic. The first volume of this collection kicks off in 12,090 AD and follows a pretty similar premise to the first film. It features the same characters as Doris, Count Lee, Rei, La Armica, Greco, and Dan. Despite the storyline remaining mostly intact, the manga does provide its own spin on some of the characters. This version of La Armica is blonde, while Doris is a redhead. Some of the events are also shuffled out of order, but all in all, it retains most of the themes in the film. The ending incorporates some more elements from the original novel, but remains pretty faithful to the original material. If you prefer manga over animation, we'd definitely recommend this one. Volume 2 is where things start getting interesting, and we finally get some original content in the Vampire Hunter D saga. Well, original is a bit of an exaggeration, since the manga is a direct adaptation of Kikuchi's second novel, titled Razor of Gales. Here, we visit a small village called Tepes. The population of Tepes once used to live in fear beneath the shadow of the noble's manor, but after the nobility disappeared from the region, the castle sat empty. A dark and terrifying place, It spawned numerous ghost stories designed to keep youngsters away from the place. However, despite all the cautionary tales, 4 children managed to enter its halls, one of whom was never seen again. The rest of the children also had their memories wiped out with no recollection of what happened. Some 10 years later, the village saw a rise in vampires yet again. However, these creatures weren't your standard vampires that we'd grown accustomed to. Instead, these bloodthirsty creatures could walk in the sunlight, greatly increasing the threat that they pose. As time passed, the villagers grew suspicious that the disappearance of the child had something to do with these newly gained powers. They hire a vampire hunter to investigate the crime and, well, it turns out to be our protagonist, Dee. This is one of the first times in the series that we see the sacred ancestor, and the tale turns out to be far more disturbing than we could have ever imagined. The third volume follows the plot of the second film closely, but there are some pretty noticeable changes. Just like in the film, Dee is hired by a wealthy man to find his daughter, who has been kidnapped by the powerful Lord Meyerling. In this version, Meyerling is shown to have a pretty respectable reputation among the humans, but the price on his head is too much for Dee to ignore. Thus begins a race against time as Dee tries to stop Meyerling before he can get to the spaceport in the Claiborne States, which will allow him to get off planet. In his desperation, the girl's wealthy father enlists another clan of ruthless mercenaries to capture Meyerling, and as you can probably guess, this is the Marcus family. In the fourth manga, we're introduced to one of the only safe places on the entire planet, a floating town known simply as the City. The tiny metropolis follows a seemingly random course, hovering just a few feet over the ground, which keeps it safe from most invading monsters. The place is seen as paradise, but then, one day, an invasion threatens the tranquility of this lone haven. When things get this bad, there's only one person you can call, and Dee is soon hired to protect the city from the scourge. While Dee is still preoccupied with external threats, internal turmoil disrupts the city's peace. A former denizen, a Lori Knight, and a man named John M. Braselli, Pluto 8, seize control of the city and catapulted in a more dangerous direction. Soon, Dee realizes that it's not just vampires he needs to be wary of. The fifth volume occurs in a secluded village that's mostly safe from the dangers of the night. Some 30 years ago, an ageless beauty from this village was bitten by a vampire, and this woman now holds the key to maintaining peace in the village. It's revealed that this small village is one of the only places on the planet where the nobility and humanity are coexisting without tearing each other to shreds on a regular basis. But as Dee nears this village on his travels, he begins to have strange dreams of the mysterious girl and is forced to track her down. This pits him against an entire village, and none of the occupants would let him get to the woman. This threatens the delicate balance of the village, and Dee is forced to navigate around the customs and structures that the woman has put in place. The sixth volume follows the tale of a captured frontierswoman named Tay, who is being held by nobility in the remote prison called Castle Gardenia. Some 8 years after she was captured, a mysterious people finder named Granny Viper is charged with the recovery of the girl, but it's pretty uncertain whether her hired escorts, the Bullo brothers, would be able to accomplish the task. The brothers are known for being shifty, and the castle itself is one of the most terrifying places we've ever seen, even in this monstrous universe. Eventually, Dee falls upon him to rescue Tay, but there are more than a few enemies standing in his path. The seventh volume kicks off when Dee is handed a strange gemstone by a mysterious woman on her deathbed. With her dying breath, she requests that Dee deliver the gemstone to her sister. This leads Dee on a mad dash across the frontier, which is infested with every kind of mercenary and monster you can imagine. Even the man who murdered the woman joins the chase, and soon it's evident that the gemstone is far more valuable than it initially seems. Throughout the story, Dee struggles to keep the priceless jewel in his pursuer's hand and simultaneously investigates the secret of the unassuming little jewel. In the final volume of this manga series, Dee is summoned to the town of Florence by the sister of a murdered woman. When he appears in the ancient city, Dee finds it in the grips of a vicious plague that seems to be wiping out the entire population. Upon investigation, he traces the origin of the disease to the nearby sea. The entire thing turns into a race against time when Dee discovers that he must peek into the past in order to grasp the secrets of this lethal plague. What happened back in the decadent age of vampires, which led to the nobility being banished? Who was the black figure that banished them? All clues point to the former baron who met his end at the hands of a stranger and a terrifying curse that managed to survive for a millennium. Though the initial plan was to adapt the entire catalog, the publishers canceled this series after sales fell off. Despite this, the series won numerous awards during its run and is still beloved by many longtime fans. In 2023, a physically printed version of the manga was released for the first time. Vampire Hunter D, Message from Mars. Mars. Now, this is probably one of the least known tales in the saga of D. The ongoing graphic novel Message from Mars is an adaptation of an unpublished short story by Kikuchi. The story was never translated into English and was accessible to a few select fans who won it in a contest. However, recently, the story was adapted into a 5-part series by Stranger Comics, and so far, we've been pretty pleased. This story changes the viewpoint to that of Cecile, a clairvoyant human colonist who resides on Mars. In one of her visions, Cecile foretells a terrifying fate for both the world and our protagonist, D. None of Cecile's prophecies have been false so far, and thus, she desperately reaches out to D. When the Dampier arrives on the Red Planet, he discovers that the entire settlement is basically a blood farm for the nobility. As honorable as always, D sets out to cleanse the planet from the vampiric scourge, but this leads him through paths that he's never really traversed before. The comic also depicts some aspects of D's beginning as a vampire hunter, as well as the ascension of the nobility to Mars after nuclear weapons ravaged the Earth. It seems that this tale is going to lean into our hero's past way more than other previous tales, and we're here for it. Marvelous verdict! Well, it's certain that D's path has been a long, bloody, and convoluted affair. However, despite all these stories, we haven't received a concrete answer regarding the origins of our hero. But I guess that's what propels this story ahead, as the intrigue keeps us fans coming back for more every time a new installment is released. Though we'll have to wait a little bit longer for our answers, it's certain that we're all in for this ride. But what do you think about D's secret origins? Do you have a favorite Vampire Hunter D moment that we missed? We'd love to hear it in the comments down below. And don't forget to hit subscribe to stay updated with all our marvelous content. That's it for this one, but don't worry because we'll see you all again real soon.